It's a pleasure to be invited for this webinar and to be part of the Global New York team. Vanya and I value the long-standing partnership we have with the state of New York, and being here today is a great satisfaction to us. Throughout our 20 plus year career assisting US companies in Brazil, we have observed that despite all the challenges, the US has done very well in Brazil. And today we want to help the New York companies understand that. So here are the main topics we are going to cover today. Our intention is to show you why you should consider or should keep Brazil on your radar. I'm not going to go over all of this now, as we will be showing this on the slide. So next, please. Okay, let's get started taking a quick look at the macroeconomic indicators. With approximately the size of the continental US in terms of area, Brazil has a population of about 213 million people. Last year's GDP of approximately 2 trillion US ranked us as the 9th largest economy in the world. The GDP growth back then was around 1.1%, a shy growth, I know, but celebrated by the local markets, consumers, and investors that reacted positively, gaining confidence in this new scenario. The pre-COVID estimate was that Brazil was going to grow again this year by around 3%. As we will see in the next slides, this estimate has changed dramatically in Brazil as it did worldwide. Inflation was kept below the government's target. And for a country that has experienced a 3-digit inflation some decades ago, this rate is remarkable. The current exchange rate here does not look very favorable for US exports, but once you understand better the Brazilian market, you will see that the weak Brazilian currency boosts the Brazilian exports, which ends up boosting the need for investment on productivity and on the modernization of the local industry, revolving in export opportunities for US companies. And as you can see here, the opportunities are real once Brazil has been enjoying a trade surplus for some consecutive years. This does not necessarily mean that the imports went down, but it shows the commitment of this country in increasing its presence in global markets. Our international reserves are still strong, as you can see. In fact, it increased consistently over the last 18 years, jumping from 36 billion in the end of 2002 to almost 358 billion in September this year. So the scenario confirms that Brazil's long-term importance cannot be overlooked. As one of the US councils quoted during an event I attended a few years ago when Brazil was going through an economic crisis, when an economy of 213 million people gets its engines started, you better be on board, right? Next. Everyone knows Brazil for its natural resources, for soccer and tourist locations, but what not everyone knows is that Brazil, like the US, is a highly diversified and dynamic market. It is the largest country and economy in Latin America, being second only to the US in the Western Hemisphere. It is home to the largest aerospace, automotive, oil and gas, mining, capital goods, medical and chemical industries in the region, being also one of the largest consumer markets in the world, and the second largest exporter of food after the US only. Brazil ranks third as the third largest market for beauty and healthcare products, and also the third largest for PCs. It is the fifth largest for medical equipment, mobile phones, automotives, and TVs. In addition, it ranked as the fifth largest growing source for FDI to the US in 2019, and the ninth destination for US export sales on that same year. Brazil's large middle class currently represents 3% of the global consumer market. In addition, we are among the world's top generators of renewable and electric energy and have the largest reserves of iron ore, bauxite, manganese, tin, and gold, not to mention the massive pre-salt and oil and gas deposits. Next, please. After 3 years of deep economic recession, the Brazilian economy was steadily recovering until it was impacted by the COVID pandemic. The projection for this year is that our economy will shrink by 5%, but grow by 4% in 2021. But what I would like to remark here in this slide is that even during the recession years, Brazil remained within the top 10 largest economies in the world. This has actually to do with the three main things that even in the midst of the effects of the crisis were and will continue to be the drivers of Brazil's growth. And we will see more about this in a couple of slides. So Bolsonaro's sustainable macroeconomic reform agenda is getting the economy back on track. And here I'm referring to the already performed labor and pension reforms and the administrative and tax system reforms that are under discussion. Infrastructure investments are also at the top of the recovery agenda as the government hopes to attract local and foreign investments in projects across sectors to bolster both the economy and the government's coffers. By the end of 2020, the Brazilian government expects to have completed at least 18 projects of selling off public property, including public-private partnerships, privatizations, concessions, and lease. Estimated investments from these infrastructure projects total over 6.4 billion US. Just to give you an idea, the ongoing private-public infrastructure projects include port terminals, airport, railways, and highways, in addition to projects in the water and wastewater sectors, which are expected to have a great impact in the health of the local population too. So many public and private partnerships are taking place, which brings opportunities to new players, including foreign suppliers, as we will see further down in this presentation. So all this together, plus the fact that the end of the year is favorable for the industrial production, this all has increased the optimism in the business community as a whole. Next, please, Vanya. And another sign that this optimism is real is the most recent MOU that was signed by the US and the state of São Paulo's government on October 1st this year. The goal of this MOU is to double the trade between São Paulo and the US in the next 5 years. To better situate you on the importance of this collaboration, we have listed here some interesting facts about the state of São Paulo. As you may know, São Paulo is Brazil's largest state and its main industrial and business hub. With around 45 million people, São Paulo is almost the size of Argentina and slightly smaller than Colombia. It has the fourth largest consumer market in Latin America and is responsible for 32% of Brazil's industrial production. Last year, the GDP growth was twice that of Brazil. With the second largest growth in Latin America, it reached $613 billion US. As the state's finance secretary recently recalled, if São Paulo was a country, it would have registered the fifth largest growth rate in the world, behind India, China, Indonesia, and Pakistan only. As you can see there in the slide as well, if it was a country, São Paulo would be the fourth largest in Latin America, behind Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, and the 22nd largest worldwide. So a collaboration with the state of São Paulo is really significant and will eventually result in more opportunities for New York companies. Next, Manya. So here are the three main things that I mentioned earlier and that will still be drivers of the Brazil's growth and will not change in the long term, regardless what happens today and tomorrow. Number one, Brazil's middle class is comprised by approximately 110 million people, and it will continue to grow as the local economy develops, right? Number two, Brazil has been, is, and will remain a country of abundant natural resources. And number three, Brazil has also been, is, and will continue to be a place where there is a huge demand for additional infrastructure. So this will all react opportunities for US and New York companies. Next, please. And these are currently the fastest growing industries in Brazil. I'm not gonna go over them all, but in a nutshell, the healthcare sector is always looking for new medical devices and technologies, and so are each of these other sectors in this slide. Despite the economic crisis in the past years, e-commerce kept growing, and this has not changed during the pandemic. In 2019, online sales were about 17 billion US. This value corresponds to an increase of more than 22% in relation to the previous year. Today, more than half of the Brazilian population, approximately 126 million people, are internet users, which means that more than 70% of the Brazilian population is connected to the web. This accounts for over 1/3 of the Latin American e-commerce market. So please keep in mind that e-commerce can be a great strategy for your business here in Brazil. Next one. So yes, we saw that Brazil is huge, Brazilian economy is huge, middle class is huge, industry is highly diverse. In addition to all those factors, there is also the fact that Brazilians are receptive to the US culture and products. And I will show you in a few slides ahead that there are opportunities for New York companies in almost all the industrial sectors. Proximity to the US is a fact, and so is the access to other South American countries. But to be realistic here, we need to see the flip side of it. And here it is, doing business in Brazil is complex. And why is that? In general words, government protects Brazil's diversified industries through high taxes and regulations. So let's try to understand this a little bit better. Next one, yeah. The high taxes and regulations that I've just mentioned, combined with a high level of bureaucracy and the lack of infrastructure, results in what is locally known as Custo Brasil, or the Brazil cost. In a nutshell, this is an approximate 45% tax that local and foreign companies pay to do business in Brazil. To illustrate this further, we brought to you today a hypothetical cost build-up for an imported machine into Brazil. Next one. So here you can see that the final price of an imported product at the port can get 60%, sometimes 70% higher than its FOB price. The main issue though is not the high duties per se, but the taxation system. As you can see in this slide, the taxes are one on top of the other in what we call a cascade system. The good news though is that import duties vary according to the product category and not to its origin, okay? So this means that all of your competitors, including the European and the Asian ones, will be subject to the exact same taxation. In addition, as we just saw, most of the taxes, around 45%, as I just mentioned, are also paid by the domestic providers of goods and services. So don't let the high taxes scare you away. But keep in mind that the Brazilian industry is very diversified, so the opportunities are more for high-tech and innovative products than for supplies. If your product fall under these two criteria, they might even be eligible for a tax reduction, as we will see further down. Next one. Okay, as I said in the beginning of this presentation, despite all the challenges presented here, the US has done very well in Brazil. And the similarity amongst our countries listed here have helped on that. But how does this all reflect in the economic area? So until the 50s, the Brazilian culture, education, and habits were very much European oriented. But from the 60s on, this has changed, and currently the influence of the US culture is huge in our routine. As a result, Brazil has a natural affinity for the US and a high regard for US products, brands, and technology. Our bilateral trade is characterized by its diversity of products, and the US and Brazil relationship is strategically important for both of our countries. Next one. The US is Brazil's second major trade partner, second to China only, but it is the largest market for Brazil's value-added manufactured products. And it has actually been for many, many years. And Brazil is also a very important trade market for the US. As you can see here, in 2019, Brazil ranked as the 9th largest destination for US export sales. To give you an idea of the level of opportunities that this market presents to US suppliers, I want to tell you that 400 companies out of the Fortune 500 have significant operations in Brazil, many of them established 100 years ago. According to the US Census Bureau, almost 74% of US exports in 2019 were delivered to these top 15 trade partners ranked on the right side of the slide. And the top increase in purchase of American exports from 2018 to 2019 belonged to Belgium, up 10.6%, Brazil, up almost 9%, Netherlands, up 4%, Germany, 4.4%, and the United Kingdom, up 4.3%. Just to give you another interesting fact, the leading the decliners were Hong Kong, China, Singapore, and Mexico. Next, please. Last year, Brazil and the US traded more than 73 billion in goods. As you can see in this slide, this two-way trade grew more than 45% since 2007. And the US ran a 12 billion trade surplus with Brazil last year. In fact, the US has been consecutively enjoying a trade surplus with Brazil since 2008. So the opportunities for New York companies in Brazil are real, like I have mentioned before. There is an affinity and an appetite for US goods and services, and the US brands, and technologies are perceived as high quality. Next, please, Vanya. And this is the rank of the top 10 US exports to Brazil in 2019. Note that services are not included in these statistics, but according to the data from the US government, the US also has a service trade surplus with Brazil. In 2018, the latest figure available, this surplus was up to 22 billion. Information technologies is the main category that comes to my mind as a best prospect in the services market. And within that, I am considering artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, financial services, payment solutions, cybersecurity, telemedicine, distance learning, streaming and broadcasting, and we can go on and on. Next, Vanya. As for the New York export sales, Brazil was the 20th largest market for New York goods last year. And here we can see the main goods that the state of New York sold to Brazil. It's no surprise that products for the medical, aerospace, chemical, and industrial sector are included in this list. Those are sectors that have been best prospects for New York companies for years. And this has to do not only with the similarities and affinities, but also with the fact that to drive our exports further, Brazil needs to modernize this vast industry base that we have. So innovative technologies and solutions will always be welcome in our market. And this is true not only for these segments reckoned here, next, Vanya, but also for all those listed in this slide. It's from A to Z, as you can see. And I'm sure that among the segments that you represent, each one of you can fit in one of those segments. Nonetheless, once again, an important consideration that applies for all of those sectors is that, differently from most of our neighbors, the opportunities in Brazil are more for high-tech and innovative products than supplies. And again, this is due to our vast industry base, which is still very protected, as we saw, and therefore the taxes will be higher for products that are domestically manufactured. And I'm sorry I'm reiterating this again and again, but most of the exporters look at Brazil as another market in South America. But the truth is that we are a completely different animal in the region, starting with our size, with our culture and language. As you know, we are our language is Portuguese and not Spanish, ending with our industrial capability, which, as I said before, needs to be further modernized. And again, here's where the opportunities are. Next, Vanya. So looking at modernizing Brazil's industry base further and increasing our export drive, the government of Brazil is always acting in terms of reducing tariffs and non-tariffs barriers. And here you can see some that stand out, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the ex-tariff, which is a regime that awards a temporary tariff reduction for the import taxes on products that cannot be sourced locally, either because they are not manufactured domestically or because there is a shortage or a high demand. A good example of this effort is what we have just saw during the pandemic. The Brazilian government has decreased the import duties on medical products and equipment that could be used to fight the COVID pandemic to zero. The ex-tariff regime usually lasts 2 years, but it can be extended or shortened. And it's important to know that it goes to a product category, not a company per se. So this means that if your competitor has already applied for that, you will also be benefit. Other examples of the positive efforts of the government of Brazil are the reduction of the bureaucracy barriers to trade. So for instance, in the infrastructure investments that we just saw that are needed, the government has changed the concession model that was complicated and typically involved large projects. The time frame was also reduced. To give you an idea, it used to be 20 to 25 years. And now the bidding notices are also publicized in English. Those efforts are all expected to attract foreign and US companies in getting the bid out. Next, Vanya. So the message we want to share today is that despite the fact that, doing business in Brazil can be complex, the opportunities do overcome the challenges. But doing business in Brazil requires an intimate knowledge of the local environment. And so business is therefore best done for SMEs through a local agent or distributor, that can help you navigate this market's complexities and nuances. This is actually valid for all sizes of companies, but getting back to what I was just saying, in some cases, a local presence is actually required by law, okay? Therefore, identifying the right partner and establishing a personal relationship with this partner is going to be key for your success in Brazil, especially considering that our business culture relies heavily upon the development of strong personal relationship. And the good news is that we can help. Here you can see all the services. I'm running short of time, so I'm not gonna go over it, but this is all the services that the Global New York Brazil Trade Office can provide you through the Global New York program. Next, Vanya. With that, I would like to wrap up by saying that in May 2021, our offices will be hosting a multi-state trade mission and multi-sector trade mission to Brazil that will be also visiting Colombia. We are still not 100% sure that this will indeed be a presential trade mission. It might end up being virtual due to the circumstances. But the important thing to keep in mind is what Lennox mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, that the state grant funding, there is grant funding available to offset participation costs in person or virtually, right, Lennox? I'm certain Lennox and his team can provide some more detailed information on this funding. And Vanya and I will also be happy to clarify any doubts you may have in regards not only to Brazil, to our services, but to this mission per se. So with that, I will end up by sharing our contact information and saying again that it's a pleasure to be back to the New York team. And Vanya and I are eager to work closely with you in Brazil. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Claudia. Excellent presentation, and I'm sure everyone online is really appreciative of this, as is evident from the questions that are already coming in. But in keeping with our plan schedule, we will turn it over without further ado to our colleague Veronica Medina, who will present on the other markets in South America, namely Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. And then following Veronica's presentation, we will then answer your questions. So we encourage you, please continue to type in your questions in the chat box. We look forward to engaging immediately after Veronica's presentation. Again, Claudia, thank you very much, and for the great technical service provided by Vanya as well. Okay, Veronica, take it away.
So good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. First of all, I want to thank Empire State Development for making this webinar possible, also along with the Conference of the Great Lakes of St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers. I think it is a very timely webinar to have for you to look at some very diverse economies and some very dynamic opportunities in the countries that I will be presenting, which is Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. So just briefly, I will be discussing COVID-19, giving you some brief overviews on the 4 countries. The most important thing, the opportunities that we're seeing in these 4 countries, which are quite vast and varied, very similar to what Claudia presented just now for Brazil, which actually is very important, because then you can see as a whole what opportunities you have in the region of South America. I'll be giving some ideas of some of the trade shows and also recommendations for New York companies to do some real business in our market. So just to give you an update with regards to COVID, as you all saw in the news a few months ago, Latin America was one of the hotspots in the world that we have weathered through. And I don't think that I remember ever in my lifetime a large percentage of the world's population waking up every day and just thinking, okay, how many cases do we have today? And do we have to go back under quarantine? So these are some of the numbers that you see from our markets. I think what we need to focus on here, obviously, is the percentage of cases recovered, which is high for all the markets, especially Chile, Colombia, and Peru. I think the numbers now have stabilized, and we're moving forward with the opening of the economic businesses here in those markets. The other thing, just for the people that are interested in this subject, as we all know, for COVID, the testing and the tracking is key. And I do have to say that, and the numbers show, Chile here has the most amount of testing being done in the whole of the Latin American region. So that's very positive for us here in Chile. So this might be information which is hopefully, which will be relevant to you. We have some very good news. We actually have a client from the United States that is in Colombia right now, meeting with his clients there. So that's very good news. Some sense of normality. As you see here, international travel pretty much in all the countries now has started to open. Obviously, look for particular restrictions from certain countries around the world, but international travel has started to come back. There's the mandatory use of the mask in public spaces. If you're traveling to our countries, you do have to do a 14-day quarantine. But the latest information from Colombia is you do not have to do that if you come with a negative PCR test. And also just some information on the curfews that are still ongoing. So next, I'll be looking at some trade statistics. First of all, I would like to mention that the United States for Chile, Colombia, and Peru is the second largest trading partner. So the United States is very important to our economies, but not just on the trade side, also on the investment side. And for Argentina, the United States is its 4th largest trading partner. And you can see here that between Chile and Colombia, they have 30%, the United States has 30% of that market, of the export market. I wanted to give everybody just some sense of maybe how this pandemic has affected the trade statistics. So we were able to get the latest information from customs, which is up to June. So we've compared the January-June period between 2019 and 2020. And obviously we see here an effect on the exports. Argentina, you see, has been hit a little bit harder, but I think that's also between a mixture of the pandemic. It's also import regulations that the Fernandez government has brought into play. But here we have some wonderful news, I think. So you can see some of the export numbers between 2018, 2019. You see an increase for all three countries, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. And Peru, a great success case with a 64% increase from exports, specifically from New York. And these are the sectors where we see those increases: industrial electric machinery and some optical surgical equipment. These pie charts just give you a brief idea in terms of the industry sectors. Again, as Claudia mentioned, please remember, these are all products. What is based on services, technology will not be presented here because this is based on harmonized code data. But here you see across the board, all four countries, industrial machinery is the most important category of product coming into our country. And in Peru, that's divided quite equally also with the precious metals category. So again, some very good news here. Some of the fastest growing sectors from New York into our region. For Argentina, you see a whopping 5,000% increase in mineral fuels coming from New York. Wood pulp as well, very strong increase with 2,000%. In Chile, we see dairy products and industrial machinery increasing from New York. From Colombia, organic chemicals is the strongest, but followed very closely by baking products and essential oils. And then Peru, you can see why that 64 increase between 2018 and 2019, made up by 4,000% increase in precious metals, and also 2,000% increase in iron and steel. I will give you a market overview of these four countries. And if you see me moving my hand a lot, it's because there's a fly that's bothering me right now. So sorry for that. So with regards to Argentina, it's the second largest economy in South America. It's actually the 8th largest country in the world. And it's one of the world's major exporters of wheat, soy, and meat. So very strong in agriculture. The GDP per capita at PPP is over $20,000. And it also has the highest literacy rate in Latin America. With regards to Argentina, in terms of free trade agreements, they have 7 signed, mostly within the region, but there is a U.S. trade and investment framework agreement signed back in 2016, but that is still pending. So there's no further advancements on that. With regards to Chile, we are a regional leader in economic freedom and in globalization. We also have one of the least corrupt countries in the region as well, which is obviously very helpful to the business environment. We are the world's largest copper exporter and second exporter of salmon in the world, and also top 10 in agriculture for the world. We have the highest GDP per capita in Latin America at over $23,000. And we are the first in Latin America with regards to the global competitiveness ranking. And for the next 3 countries, which is Chile, Colombia, and Peru, you will see that they are very strong with regards to free trade agreements. They're very open economies, and Chile has the most free trade agreements signed in the world, and we have the agreement with the United States dating back to 2004. So really here, and in all the countries, I think in all the region, as Claudia also mentioned, American products are known, but not only that, they are regarded very highly, considered of very high quality. So that's obviously an advantage that you have over the competition that you might face in our markets. With regards to Colombia, it's the third largest economy in South America. It's one of the world's most biodiverse countries, and it's called the coffee nation for a good reason, because it's the fourth largest coffee producer in the world. The GDP per capita is $14,000 at PPP. Colombia is also a very strong FDI destination. As we see here by the numbers, it's actually 9th among the top 10 developing economies in the world and 23rd in the world. So obviously, it's very interesting in terms of attracting investment. Again, 16 free trade agreements, and they have one with the USA since 2012. And also because of the proximity of Colombia to the United States in terms of its geography, there's a lot of American influence there. With regards to Peru, it's Latin America's #1 producer in gold, silver, zinc, also a leader in copper, by the way. It's one of the world's most culturally and historically rich countries, and it's a #1 exporter in blueberries, asparagus, and quinoa. The GDP per capita is just over $12,000, and it does have the lowest country risk score in Latin America. Peru economy has been doing very well pre-pandemic, and we will also see that post-pandemic. Also with 22 free trade agreements, and with the USA dating back to 2009. So here, I like to show this, so to see that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I know we are in challenging times, but also in this challenging times, we have seen many opportunities come up, and we will look at that in the following slides. But just to show you, just like anywhere in the world, 2020, our GDP will be hit, but coming back strongly in 2021, Peru doing the best out of the 4 countries in 2021, and then we're leveling off at positive GDP growth rates for 2022. So some of the sector opportunities that you see, and because of the time restriction, obviously, I will not cover these by sector, but what I do, or by subsector, what I do want to transmit is that these are real opportunities that we have actually seen during this last year. It's actual companies in these sectors that we have been helping in this market. And apart from that is also trends that your local US embassies are seeing in our markets, and obviously helping American companies in these sectors. Argentina, a lot tied to agriculture for the reasons that we discussed before, mining as well, and with regards to technology, we see opportunities in e-health and fintech. For Chile, agriculture, mining, which is not a surprise. Clean tech, just so you know, Chile has some of the most strict environmental regulations in place in Latin America, and it's very committed to the world climate change agreements, world agreements. So clean tech is very important. And with regards to ICT as well, Chile is the first country in the region to put out a bid on its 5G network, and it's building a fiber optic cable between Chile and Japan, which will actually go through Asia. So a lot of technology companies actually come to the market to test out to pilot their projects. With regards to Colombia, we see opportunities in agriculture, in the food and beverage sectors, And also ICT, Colombia is doing an amazing job in terms of its opportunities in technology. And just some information for you, actually, just very recently, the first center for the fourth industrial revolution in Latin America has actually been opened in Medellin. So there are a lot of clusters in Colombia with regards to technology. In Peru, again, as I mentioned before, Peru is also a very dynamic country. Opportunities in ag tech, as we saw, there's some of the major exporters in the world of ag products, so there's no surprise there. The opportunities in the agricultural sector, cybersecurity opportunities. I think we've all been hit by cyber attacks in the region, but there are real opportunities in Peru with regards to that. And also something that's very interesting is that President Vizcarra has actually announced the development of renewable energies in Peru. So that's also something quite new and exciting in that market. So what are some of the opportunities or the trends that we've seen during these past 9 months during the pandemic in all of these 4 markets? There's a trend for healthy foods. There's a trend for technologies for working from home, for e-learning. Still, a lot of our schools are closed. So opportunities relating to that. 5G and the connectivity, again, I think it's no surprise since a large proportion of the workforce is working from home. The government is pushing, and private companies, for these connectivity advancements. With regards to digitalization of companies and e-commerce, this trend was already installed in our markets way before the pandemic hit. But I think the pandemic has actually just put it on warp speed, as we say, and this is very exciting for us, and all the opportunities relating to these technologies. Medical technologies, there's no surprise there, and something that's very interesting, that a topic that has arisen from the pandemic is with regards to bringing our supplies chains closer to home, right? I think there are many countries in the world that are undergoing this discussion right now, and the USA is obviously undergoing this discussion. And it's just very interesting that Latin America might actually provide an excellent alternative for bringing those supply chains closer to you. So these are some of the trade shows. It's obviously not an exhaustive list. It's just to give you some idea of trade shows that are happening in our markets. If there are industry trade shows that you're interested in that are not being shown in these slides, please let us know. We can obviously provide that information to you on a one-to-one basis. So we see in Chile, some important trade shows relating to mining, Expomin, the largest trade show in Latin America in mining, a medical trade show and a construction trade show, all taking place next year. For Peru, their mining show, Peromin, is the most important one in that country, and a food and a fintech trade show whose dates are still to be determined. In Argentina, we see mining trade show in May, food as well in April, and a medical show in September of next year. And in Colombia, we have the Gold Symposium, which is actually quite important, taking place actually November, so just next month, medical and a gaming trade show. Again, just to voice a little bit of what Claudia mentioned, please participate in the Great Lakes Trade Mission to Brazil and Colombia, which is taking place in May of next year, and contact your local Empire State Development Executive for more information on that. So what are some of the services that we offer New York companies? As Lennox mentioned, Claudia mentioned, we are here to help you from making the decision in terms of the market information that you need to know, and making the decision of which of our countries makes more sense to you, or actually all of them might make sense to you, from the market research side, following on to the business partner searches in terms of identifying who you should be doing your business with in our markets, whether that's through a distributor, end clients, and all the way through to trade mission, trade exhibitions. And for obvious reasons, this year we have been doing everything virtually. I think it's very key to, or I would like to let you know my personal experience of how March came for us. I think we were very scared when we were all sent home, but through the months, it was very clear to us that our companies needed to continue doing their business in our region, not just in the sense of exploring the market to maybe have the information ready to go when the markets open back up, but to continue developing the market, selling their products and services to our markets. And we've had quite a number of American companies that are actually, because of the virtual meetings and the reports that we've done for them, that are actually selling and have found a place for their products and services in our markets. So as Lennox said, the services are for free. You also have the possibility of seeking state funds, federal funds, for us to help you. So really are there to assist you maybe through what is a challenging time. But our experience has been very positive in that sense. We see our companies wanting to continue with their business, even though they have been unable to travel. So just to end with some recommendations for the markets, these are very general in terms of how to do business in our markets. It's critical, and I think as Claudia mentioned, it's critical to have somebody here on the ground that is going to help you with the language, with the cultural barriers, with complying with each of the country's regulations. We might all be South American countries. We might all be Spanish-speaking South American countries, but really the way business is done between these four countries is very different. So you need to have that local knowledge. Also, sure to provide support to your local counterpart with marketing, with training. And like Claudia mentioned, personal relationship is key in our markets. And until you can travel and you can come back to our market, I think the technology, the virtual has helped a lot, and we've seen a very good uptake from the local companies in wanting to be involved in these virtual conversations. Another point which I think I've made throughout the presentation with regards to the openness of the economies that we work in, and also with the free trade agreements that our countries have. You have to come in to these markets, obviously, with a clear business strategy, but also to be competitive and to have clear what is your value-added proposition in terms of quality, in terms of price, in terms of after-sales service. You have to be very proactive. I know we might have, identified some excellent leads for you in our markets, or you might have some excellent meetings that with local counterparts, but you can't leave it at that. You have to be actively following up with them via email, via telephone, because we tend to find that if that follow-up doesn't occur, then maybe the business goes cold a little bit. You have to do your due diligence. I think this is for any country that you do business in the world, but please do your due diligence. We are obviously there to help you with that, and do get legal support when you're looking at contracts. And again, just to avoid maybe some headaches, hold on, I've got my timer on, so I'm just going to turn it off. And I'm finishing up. So just so to avoid some headaches and be very efficient in terms of your timing with what you're doing in our markets, you have to negotiate with decision makers, and we can obviously help you pointing who those are, because it does vary from country to country of who that decision maker is. Not necessarily is it always going to be the CEO of the company. And with that, I really want to thank you for being here with us today. Like I said in the beginning, I think there are so many opportunities right now that we're seeing in the region, and the countries that we are working in are very dynamic and present a good target for New York companies. So with that, I will end it, and I think pass it back to Leonard.